And again, breaking news now. A Georgia jury has reached a verdict in the trial of the 3 men charged with killing Ahmaud Arbery. We have a live look into the courtroom through our partners at Court TV. Let's listen in as the jury enters.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Madam Foreperson, I understand you have reached a verdict as to each defendant.
We have, Your Honor.
Could you please hand your verdict forms to the sheriff? I'm going to go ahead and address each one of these verdict forms separately. The first verdict form I have is the State of Georgia versus Travis McMichael. Mr. McMichael, please stand. Verdict is as follows. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, State of Georgia, the State of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, case number CR 000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. I'm going to ask that whoever just made an outburst be removed from the court, please. As this court has indicated, I ask that there be no outbursts in the court, and I expect as much from the gallery. Please respect the court's desire for this as we move forward. If you feel like you need to make a comment or otherwise demonstrate with respect to the verdict, I do ask that you step out of the courtroom now. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Dated this 24th day of November, 2021, signed by the foreperson. Have a seat. As to Gregory McMichael. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, the State of Georgia versus Greg McMichael, case number CR 200433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, not guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant Greg McMichael guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant Greg McMichael guilty. This 24th day of November, 2021, signed by the foreperson. As to William R. Bryan. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, State of Georgia versus William R. Bryan, case number CR 2000433, jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan not guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan not guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan not guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Signed this 24th day of November by the foreperson. Go ahead and see. The court having read the verdicts and accepted the verdicts, anything from the state?
No, Your Honor, nothing from the state.
Anything from the defense?
We ask the jury be polled, Your Honor.
Do all defendants ask the jury be polled? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask each of you individually a set of 2 questions with respect to the verdicts that I have just read. If you could please respond when you hear your juror number. Juror number 1, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, sir.
Juror number 2, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, sir.
I can't. Okay, 2. Juror number 3, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes.
Juror number 4, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, sir.
Juror number 5, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 7, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 8, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 9, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 10, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 11, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 12, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
And juror 16, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, sir.
The jury has been polled. Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
From Greg McMichael?
No, Your Honor.
From Mr. Bryan?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, what that means with the court having accepted your verdict is that your role in this case is now at an end. What we're going to do today is I'm going to have all of you, the panel and the 3 alternates, go ahead and retire into the jury room. I'm going to address a couple matters logistically with you in the jury room once we get done here. But before we do that, and before I excuse you, I do want to thank you publicly for your service here in Glenn County. It has been a long trial. And I appreciate the fact that you have been attentive. You've listened to the evidence. And that is what we ask in this court. It's a very simple ask in a very complex way. So it's appreciated. When we all got together, I say we all got together, when we got together at different times, I said that I was going to thank you a number of times and how I was going to tell you I do truly appreciate your time here. Hopefully you understand why I said that when we started. I do also hope that you got a little bit of an insight into what goes on in a trial and maybe understand a little bit more of how important it is for members of our community to come down and be part of this process and serve as jurors in this community. So again, thank you for that service. And I'll come address you all in just a moment. You are excused.
All right, for the jurors.
It is this court's usual practice with regard to sentencing to go ahead and give everybody some time to put together what they need to put together for a full sentencing hearing. I'm going to have to look at the schedule and see how that works with my schedule up in Chatham County and the schedule here in Glynn County. I'll get back to everybody about some dates and see what works with respect to dates. That should give everybody an opportunity to put together whatever evidence may be shown in aggravation from the state or mitigation from the defense. Hopefully we'll get to that in the next couple of weeks. Again, I'll make sure counsel knows what those dates are. That addresses the open matter then before the court. Anything from the state before we adjourn?
Nothing further from the state, Your Honor.
From Travis McMichael?
No, Your Honor.
From Greg McMichael?
No, Your Honor.
And from Mr. Bryant?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the defendants then are ordered to remain in the custody of the sheriff, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
And the verdicts have been announced in the trial of the three men accused of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. You just heard from the judge there. Let's go over some of the charges and the verdicts that were in. Starting with Travis McMichael, he is found guilty on all counts in the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, which happened in February 2020 in a South Georgia neighborhood. Meanwhile, Gregory McMichael was found not guilty of malice murder and guilty of the other counts in this case. Also, William Roddy Bryant, another one of the defendants, was found not guilty of malice murder, and it's kind of a mixed bag of guilty and not guilty for the rest of the charges. I actually want to bring in criminal defense attorney Ann Rimner to talk about these verdicts because we're seeing a lot of guilty, not guilty on your screen, and it's really kind of hard to piece through here. Ann, are you with us now?
I am here.
What analysis can you give us on the verdict? We know Travis McMichael, who was the one who pulled the trigger, he has been found guilty on all counts, but the others were not. Why is that?
Well, it's because Travis was a shooter, and even though, you know, he didn't act alone, and that's why I think you and I talked a little bit earlier today, Jay, talking about acting in concert, acting as an accomplice. Basically, you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar. And some of the argument we heard from the prosecutor about complicity, which basically means in the felony murder, which is the false imprisonment, if they all participated in that and a death ensued, then they're all guilty of felony murder. And I think that's what you're seeing in this verdict. The not guilty on malice murder for Gregory and also for Brian is not surprising because that's a pretty high standard. And they're not the shooters, but they certainly acted together in an underlying felony that resulted in death. And it's like a bank robbery case. The getaway driver is as guilty as the person that holds up the bank, and supposedly this person didn't know what was going on. The fact that they're involved in the felony of robbery and someone dies means they're guilty of felony murder. That's the example we always hear.
What do you mean?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, what do you make of the differences in the verdicts between Gregory McMichael and William Bryant? Again, both did not pull the trigger here. Gregory McMichael, not guilty of malice murder, but guilty of all of the other charges, including felony murder, while William Bryant, not guilty of malice murder, not guilty of some of the felony murder charges, but guilty of some of the others.
I think it's because Gregory was in it to begin with Travis, and they encouraged each other, grab your gun, all that kind of testimony that we heard. Whereas Bryant wasn't. I mean, he was after the fact. He was a neighbor they didn't even know. But the thing is with him is that he was part of that false imprisonment. Remember the testimony? They trapped Arbery like a rat. And once you're involved in that underlying felony, if it's a felony murder felony, one of the enumerated felonies where you can attach felony murder and someone dies, you're guilty as a principal. You're basically just like you shot the gun yourself, just like the prosecutor said. And here's the other thing, Jay. Malice murder has the same sentence as felony murder, which is a life sentence. It's not a life without parole, it's a life sentence. So to me, it's kind of a distinction without a difference in watching these jury verdicts, because they're all going to have, I believe, similar punishments.
I was just about to ask about that. As far as punishment goes, obviously Travis McMichael faces the most severe of all the punishments. But
Yes.
What could Gregory McMichael and William Bryant be facing?
Well, they're both facing life. And the question is, this judge is very fair-minded, but he's not easy. We can certainly, he just threw someone out of the courtroom for celebrating one of the first guilty verdicts. He's been very even-handed, but he's not going to go easy on anybody. So right now, it looks like they could all face life. But like he said, he's willing to look at mitigation packages, from the defense and other factors in deciding what sentence should be given. And of course, he heard all the evidence, leading to these verdicts.
There have been some comparisons between this trial and another high-profile one that in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with Kyle Rittenhouse being acquitted in that case. There are obviously differences in both of these cases, but one similarity is the self-defense argument. Do you see that playing out one way? What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great point, Jay. And I think when you look at the self-defense argument in Rittenhouse, the argument from the state was, well, he was unjustified in assaulting certain of his victims. But the jury said that wasn't the case, that he had the right to self-defense. And in each instance, Rosenbaum grabbed for the rifle, supposedly. Then you have the skateboard as a weapon. Then you have a Glock with the third, quote-unquote victim. So, that self-defense played out incredibly to the jury. This case is one where you have to find as a juror to acquit them that they had a right to be there, that they were justified under the law to basically provoke Arbery into grabbing the gun. And the jury just couldn't find that. They basically found he wasn't armed, he was just running. And so it was a very different case with the same legal principles. And I think that's when you see the system, I think, in a lot of ways work out when you've got these arguments in two very different cases, but they're very similar too. And the jurors in each case carefully considered the evidence in each case and rendered their verdicts.
Yeah, and with the Rittenhouse case, we had one of the surviving victims, one of the key moments in the trial was him acknowledging that he pointed a gun at Rittenhouse. And you're not seeing that play out in the Arbery case.
Not at all. I mean, I always think these are like tales of two cities, two juries, two very similar type of arguments on self-defense with very different results because the facts are so disparate. You just have the theme of these same arguments of self-defense. And look at what these jurors did. They did their duty.
More broadly speaking, there's just so much interest in this case with it being the killing of a black man who was jogging unarmed in this case. Does it have any broader legal implications of how cases like this are approached or handled?
I think it does. I think this case, to me, I'm in Seattle, so I watch a case like this, and I cannot believe the attitudes of these defendants. I just can't believe it, that they would call 911 and say, what's your emergency? And they say, a black man's running down the street. But that's what they said, and they had certain attitudes in this case that are antiquated, hopefully, and should never be supported. And so that's one part that I think we have a good lesson out of this trial. The jurors are not going to support that, and they had a pretty quick verdict. But the other part of it is, what about the attorney that said no black pastors? What was that? And then the judge did a beautiful job of saying First Amendment, everyone has a right to be here. And then, of course, we had, a multitude of pastors show up to support the victim's family and the prosecution in this case. Those are important principles that we saw, played out, I think, very well in this courtroom, was basically saying, when you've got an issue of race and somebody died, for simply running and because they're black, we're not going to put up with that in the system.
Yeah, it seemed like
whether you're there in Georgia or here or anywhere else.
It seemed like the issue of race was just a huge factor in this case, and it showed in the courtroom with your example that you just gave. As far as how the prosecution handled this trial, do you see any differences? There was some criticism of how the prosecution handled the Rittenhouse trial. Did the prosecutors do a better job in this case?
The prosecutor did a far better job in this case. The prosecutor in the Rittenhouse trial got sideways with the judge a number of times, as we saw, starting with commenting on the right of Rittenhouse to remain silent. I mean, that's just off the charts impermissible to comment on someone's right to remain silent. And then, of course, he argued certain evidence that had been excluded by the judge about basically a TikTok video of Rittenhouse that the judge had disallowed in evidence. And then, of course, he pointed a gun at the jury. That's like unbelievable, to point a gun with your finger on the trigger at a jury. The prosecutor, of course, in the Arbery case, I thought she did a brilliant job. I mean, she had a couple times when she got sideways with the judge, and one of them was when she said the burden of proof and reasonable doubt comes down to this: if you think they did it, then convict them. And that's not what the standard of reasonable doubt is, beyond a reasonable doubt. Other than that, she was really, I think, excellent. I really applauded her. I think a lot of people did, lawyers and civilians and judges and everyone else. She had poise. She was brilliant. She was persuasive. And I think she is to be thanked for this verdict by the citizens there in Georgia.
And just to catch our viewers up here, for someone who may be joining us as we near the top of the hour here on Newsy Live, we just heard the verdict in the trial of 3 men accused of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. He was a black jogger in South Georgia who the defendants had claimed they acted in self-defense. They say that they thought that he matched the description of a suspect in recent burglaries in the area, which is why they say they confronted him, leading to that deadly exchange, the deadly encounter, rather. As far as the charges go, Travis McMichael, he is the one who pulled the trigger that killed Arbery. He was found guilty of all charges in this, and that includes malice murder and felony murder. Will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Sentences have not been handed out yet. These are just the verdicts. Gregory McMichael was found not guilty of malice murder, but guilty of all of the other charges, as you see on the screen right there. And the third defendant, William Roddy Bryant, found not guilty of malice murder, not guilty of the second count of felony murder, but as you can see, guilty and not guilty on your screen. So mixed conclusions for William Roddy Bryant in this closely followed trial. And Ann, I want to bring you back in. As far as the defense goes, did they lost this case? What do you make of how they approached it?
I think they did a good job. I mean, I think they were well prepared, and they did a good job, overall. But I think, Bryant's lawyer, I think, had some missteps, like I just described. No black pastors. Although his closing, I thought was good. I mean, it really personalized his client and distanced him from the others. And I listened to it. I thought, I mean, maybe Bryant, will not be convicted of anything. I mean, that's a possibility. I think that they all had a really tough job in this case, and I think the best argument they had was the citizen's arrest statute, which has since been repealed because of this case. But if they had that to rely on, and they were acting on the law, under the law, then they weren't vigilantes, and they had a right to be there, with Arbery and to potentially use force. That was their argument. The jury didn't agree with it, but I think they did an admirable job presenting that theory of the case.
Is there any chance any of these 3 men will avoid life behind bars?
Yes, yeah, oh, absolutely. The judge is going to have discretion, and he may well feel that, particularly Brian, might be someone that he might treat differently. I don't know.
What might, do you have any idea what the punishment might be for him in particular?
You know, I've got to take a look at the sentencing guidelines, if they have those in Georgia. I mean, in my state, we have kind of a mathematical grid that's used by judges, looking at someone's priors and then the severity of the current offense, and then there's kind of a range that's set forward. And I've got to take a look, what the sentencing scheme is in Georgia. It used to be in a lot of states, the judge had wide discretion within a life sentence, or there might be a mandatory minimum, things like that. But if I were the judge, I would treat them all the same, because they're all convicted of felony murder, and that's the greater charge. And it doesn't matter if it's malice murder or felony murder; it's the same level of severity.
Criminal defense attorney Ann Renner, thank you so much for your time and your analysis with this verdict. We appreciate it.